Hello, everybody.
Hi, everybody out there in Hazmat World, and we've got somebody else in the room with us.
Yes, you can see that handsome face. He can't see his handsome face, but we can see it. We have none other than Mr. Dan Bowen, an all-around good dude. How are you, Dan?
I'm well. I'm going to put that one on my resume the next time I need one.
Of course.
All right, so
I'm a little nervous about this one because
why?
Well, because I feel like we've talked so much about the N94, the 1994 suits, right? And I know Dan's coming on to correct some things that are being taught out there, and I'm just hoping that the information that it's not us, right? Like, I'm like, oh crap, he's totally gonna call me out. He's gonna be like, you freaking idiot, that it has nothing to do with this suit, and I'm gonna have to be like, oh, damn it, right. I did it again. All right, so tell me what
who is Dan Bowen? Just because you haven't been on in. It's got to be a year or two.
Yeah, it's at least a few years. It was before COVID, so that one goes back a little ways.
All right.
So a little bit about myself. I work for DuPont. I'm currently in the business that makes PPE. I've been in this business for quite a few years. August 1st will actually be my 34th year with the DuPont Corporation.
Wow.
And, my roles in this business, I've dabbled on the sales side, but the vast majority of the time that I've been working with our PPE business has been as a technical support person. So I've worked very closely with a lot of hazmat organizations, law enforcement, government agencies, and more weird industrial applications than you could possibly imagine. I've been in more strange manufacturing plants that I could possibly count.
So, like, everybody thinks, oh, we can call Bob and Mike and we can find out the answer. And the truth is, I'm just pulling back the shade here a little bit, is that we don't know everything, but we have a Rolodex that is insane. And when somebody asks me a PPE question, the first guy I call is Dan.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
He gives good info. So where are we going on this? Tell us the problem, and let's start talking about this.
Yeah. So, Bob, you and I were discussing this a little while back at one of the recent conferences, and we spoke a little bit about the NFPA 1994 standard being adopted by hazmat communities, hazmat first responders all over the country. And I think I identified a number of concerns that I have with that based upon what the standard is and some of the test methodologies. And, I've got a strong opinion that some of these garments are potentially underprotecting first responders. The main issue I've got is nobody really does their homework, right? Somebody tells you that this suit's good for something. You probably want to do a little bit of digging behind the scenes. For years, I've cautioned people that purchase NFPA standard garments, whether it's for, hazmat response, arc flash, whatever it happens to be, that the individual must really take a good hard look at what's included in the testing for that standard and make sure that it meets the requirements of the job you're going to do. And I think NFPA 1994 is one that, not to pull any punches, but I think the hazmat communities, to some extent, been sold a bill of goods on it. Just based upon people believing that these things are equivalent to standard level A suits. And, that's really where my concern comes from.
I think that's a lot is I've heard this a bunch of times out there, is that, the 1994 suit is like an A- or a B+ suit. It's like that middle, and that might be the communication issue, Mike.
It might be. Okay. So I've been under the impression that the class 1 suit can go up to 10,000 parts per million of exposure and you're well protected. Have I been at least giving that information out correctly?
Well, the challenge you've got to look at is, what is that concentration? That's 1%, right? So, let's back up. So NFPA in 1994, when it was first established, was a hazmat standard for first responders that may have to work in a contaminated environment and in the event of a terrorism incident. That's what it was for. It wasn't intended for people that have to touch the bad stuff, right? It was for law enforcement that's doing traffic control or crowd control after a disbursement of some sort of a terrorism agent. but it was never intended for the people that are actually going to go out there and handle or mitigate hazardous material substances. And that's why that standard tests to such weak concentrations. A lot of the testing that's done in NFPA in 1994 is even below 1% concentration. And that's part of the problem that we're dealing with here, that, we're putting garments on people that might actually get soaked in bad stuff, that there's not data to support using those products against that level of exposure.
So do you think the conversation should include a lot more of a heavy emphasis on the mission? Because it sounds like, I can put this suit on and do things in this zone as long as I keep my exposure lower. And I'm saying that in scare quotes, because if I'm in that zone, like you said, I'm not the intent of the suit is not to be loaded up with this crap. It's to be like passing through this crap.
Right. Like like rescue. Like if a guy was going to go in and perform a rescue, this would be, you may not intentionally get some product on you, but you could be contaminated.
That's exactly it. That's really what NFP 1994 was originally intended for. It was never intended to be a standard for true hazmat response personnel. Do
you think the wording, because it's an important thing. I pull this out when I'm doing my classes, is like, what is a B suit for? And the people go, it's for splash. And I'm like, but there's an important modifier that's in there. It's supposed to be for an accidental splash. Like if you're going to definitely get wet, then you should be thinking about other things like level A's or whatever it might be. But the thing is, it's accidental. Do you think that we put on the 94 suit with the intention of going in there as opposed to the accidental exposure?
Yeah, that's a good point. You've got to take a closer look at your mission. If you've got a tank truck that's tipped over and it's leaking something, and you're going to go in there and try and stop that leak, is there a high probability you're going to get soaked with that material? And if the answer is yes, then you probably want to do a little bit more thinking about what PPE you're going to use for that particular response. If the exposure risk is low, great. Some of these 94 certified garments are probably appropriate, but you can't always guarantee that exposure risk is going to be in that low probability. In fact, in some cases, it's going to be a high exposure risk.
Right. Oh, okay. So
go ahead.
Then, all right. So then let's reframe this. What would you pull a 94 suit out for?
Well, once again, the original intent for 94 was for people that had to work in a potentially contaminated environment after a terrorism incident. Right. So, if you're going to direct traffic after a release, if you're going to be, directing people to go someplace, there's a limited number of activities that would fit that. And, the likelihood of those people being exposed to high concentrations of material in those jobs is extremely low.
So if somebody were to say work like a clandestine lab, you would say a 94 suit is not a viable option to go in there and mitigate the environment. Well,
that's a good example. It actually may be for that environment, right? Because the main thing that people are going to be doing is collecting evidence. It went back in the days when the one-pot method was everywhere in America, different story, right? Because one-pots were notorious for having the potential, potential for instantaneous conflagration, which that's a bad scene. But the one-pot method has almost disappeared with most of the crystal meth in this country coming across the border from Mexico. So when you go into a clan lab these days, it may be for some other material. It might be pill presses, etc., where the likelihood of heavy chemical exposure is going to be pretty low. So, an M94 suit might be just fine for that particular hazard or that particular mission, because you can say that, my risk of exposure is really minimal in that scenario.
So it really is more exposure-based risk analysis than even mission-specific.
Absolutely.
Okay, let me give you another scenario because I've heard this one thrown out there is we have an ammonia leak. And I'm only going to be going into the room to quickly pick up tools or set up fans or something like that. Would the 94 suit be good then?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. The concentration is a big deal, right? You're likely going to be going in there with a meter to figure out what's, whether that ammonia is in between the explosive limits, right? And of course, if it is, you're not likely to even do an entry. You're going to ventilate it. But that's a scenario where you really need to think hard about the permeation or lack thereof data that exists for that concentration of ammonia. I'm going to go back to the testing that's done. Even NFPA 1991 has been boiled down some. If you look at NFPA 1991, the current test protocol is 80 droplets on approximately a 3-inch diameter disc, right? Everybody thinks, oh, that's great. Well, if you read the fine print in the standard, which I recommend, if you wear these suits and your life is on the line, you should get a copy of these standards and you should read them. Yeah. You should understand exactly how these materials are being tested to try and quantify whether a garment that's certified to a particular standard is going to keep you safe in the scenarios you're going to be exposed to. So NFPA 1991, for example, it's 80 droplets on about a 3-inch diameter disc of material. Well, what you don't see unless you read the fine print is what is a droplet? It's a tenth of it's 2 100ths of a drop. So it's a 1 microliter. So 81 microliter drops are placed on a 3-inch piece of fabric.
They're not CC drops?
No, if you do the math on that, 80 droplets equals approximately 1.6 drops out of your standard eyedropper. That's how much material is being tested. And
I had no idea.
And if I'm going to get covered in a hazardous material, I probably want to wear some sort of a barrier that's been tested against total immersion, 100% concentration of that material, because that's likely what's going to happen if I stick my arm underneath that truck to try and deal with a valve or a leak.
Okay, so does with that being said, right? Do manufacturing companies go above and beyond the NFPA standard? Like, yeah. Would your company actually do a submersion test and see how far can we take this material?
Well, that's old school permeation, right? We used to rely on a permeation database, and most permeation databases, including DuPont's, are generally going to be 100% concentration of greater than 95 or greater than 99% concentration of materials. So going back to permeation of full strength materials, I think is just a more prudent way to go if you're dealing with the potential for high concentration of exposures. I'll give you another way that the standard's been boiled down. You'll also notice that we've moved away from permeation to cumulative permeation over time. I'll give you a real good example on that one. So for an NFPA 1991 suit, the test for mustard gas now, right? Because let's talk chemical warfare agents, because that's really where the NFPA 1994 suit was designed for. The test for mustard agent says that in a 15-minute period of time, you can't have more than 1.3 micrograms coming through the fabric. Well, that's 10 times. That's more than 10 times the threshold for standard permeation testing. Permeation testing in the United States, we report a tenth of a microgram coming through per square centimeter per minute. So the fact that, we're now looking for, well, as long as it's less than 1.3 micrograms, we've really boiled down the test a lot. And, I just think it's a disservice to the guys who got to wear these suits to be kind of short-circuiting some of this testing and testing to standards that really give a false sense of security unless somebody's really read the standard, read the test methodology, read the concentrations, and understand what is really meant by this.
Okay, so this. I got kind of maybe a weird follow-up here, right? You're coming from the point of view of a manufacturer. I would imagine that manufacturers would be excited when standards get lowered because they're able to get more of their product in. So why is the certain parts of the industry looking at this and being like, this isn't good enough? And is this due to, you had said previously we were doing permeations. when was the change in the NFPA standard that kind of sparked this difference of opinion?
Well, if you look at the latest, right, we've gone to NFPA 1990, which rolls all three standards in together now. So you only have to buy one document to read all the different test methodologies, and they're all rolled in there. But get the current one and read through it, and compare it to the older standards, and you'll notice some pretty significant differences. And you ask the question of why why are manufacturers going down this path? I think part of it is some of the fabric technologies that are being used. They might not be able to hold up to some of the testing that was used in the past to certify garments. They might have quicker breakthrough times on certain chemicals. I think part of the problem also is that the story of some of these materials, like the M94 suits, for example, not to pick on, a particular manufacturer, but, we all want to believe, right? The holy grail has always been what? I want a breathable hazmat suit that will stand up to the rigors of the job that I've got to do. And by the way, I can decontaminate and reuse it. Right. And when manufacturers come out with that story, we all want to believe it. We want to drink the Kool-Aid. Right. So when somebody tells you that, hey, we've got this holy grail, it solves all your problems, you want to believe it. And not many people, do the homework on it. And it's not just fire service. I run into the same thing with industry as well. There's a lot of manufacturers that'll cite standards that really don't have a lot to do with the application for the product, but it's a let the buyer beware Wild West market out there. There's no governing body that keeps manufacturers, on an even playing field when it comes to some of this stuff. So
what am I supposed to do? So I'm going to go buy suits for my team, whether I'm in industry or whether I'm a first responder, and I'm taking NFPA's face value that if it's certified to the standard, it's going to keep my guys safe. So how, you say do your homework. How do I do my homework on that? And how do I then apply that information to what my needs are?
I would suggest, as I've said, get a copy of the current standard, look at, NFPA 1991, 92, and 94, look at the test methodologies, look at the concentrations of chemicals that are tested. Ask the hard questions. If when you do that, you can envision scenarios where the level of testing that's been done isn't necessarily going to meet your needs. Well, push back on the manufacturer and ask for more data. See if they've got that data that would validate the use of that product at higher concentrations of materials for your particular application.
So different manufacturers, they're going to go above and beyond, and there's the potential that information exists.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, most of us use third-party independent testing labs to do our testing. And upon request, a lot of us will provide if you say, hey, give me the test data for chemicals X, Y, and Z against this suit. That's something that we can pull up for you from the testing lab that actually did the testing. There's certainly applications where the M94 is applicable, right? But my message, I guess, through all this is just understand what it is and isn't in terms of how the products are evaluated, how they're tested. And then you've got to look at your mission and figure out, hey, are my guys potentially going to be exposed to something that's way above and beyond what this thing was ever tested against? And then you got to make a decision.
I say this in class all the time, and this might be a little soapboxy and everything like that, but I say, who here is in a little bit of a panic? Who's panicked when they get into a level A? And, most of the guys are like, they're macho, they're firemen, they're Conan the fireman kind of thing. And they're like, I'm not panicking. I'm like, you should be actually petrified that you're going into a level A, because that chemical is so badass that you need to bring your entire environment inside. And I'm like, I tell them, you're not clean when you get out, and this and that. And they start looking at me like, are you kidding me? And the thing is that these books that Dan's talking about are there. They come with each piece of garment. They come with standards. If you are not understanding when you're going down range to that badass chemical that you require these suits for, and you don't know the rules, like, are you ready to go down range? Like, you're not, maybe not the guy.
Yeah, and I get that. Nobody likes wearing a level A, right? And I'm one of those people that for the first 3 minutes when I get inside that suit, I panic. I'm sucking down some air. I'm not getting as much out of a bottle as other guys do, right? Because it's eye-opening that you're zipped into something that's vapor tight and you're dealing with something that's really bad that you need to be in a suit like this.
Right.
And I get it. We've been trying to get away from level A's for a long time, and there's a place for them, but wherever possible, you want to downgrade your PPE to a more appropriate level. But yeah, you're still potentially going to have those scenarios when you're dealing with something that's bad enough that you got to be in that vapor tight suit. You want a positive air pressure environment around the human being. And that's really what a level A suit does.
Let me posit this to you and tell me if you agree with this. Instead of me picking another suit that is a lower level and that's something I can quote unquote get away with it, wouldn't it be a more prudent and more professional move is to change the environment so you don't need the higher suit?
Absolutely. Like I said with the ammonia, right? The ammonia scenario. The best thing to do with an ammonia, unless you got a casualty, you got to go in and get, ventilate. Don't go in, right? Don't go in until you get the concentrations down low enough that you don't need to be in that high level of protection. Absolutely. And the other point I'll make on that is, if we're looking at these garments, manufacturers make coverall style suits out of the same fabric they make level A suits out of. So you don't have to compromise the chemical performance of your barrier of your suit just because you downgrade to a coverall style versus a vapor tight encapsulated suit.
I think you just blew some people's heads up. I don't think they even knew that was a thing.
Well, that would be your C and B type ensembles. Yeah. Right.
You take a coverall style with an SDBA, it's a level B. You put it with a PAPR, it's a level C. But that fabric that we make level A suits out of, it's not just DuPont. All of us do it, right? You can get that. You can get other garment styles made out of that same fabric. So there's no reason to downgrade your chemical protection just because you're getting away from an encapsulated vapor tight suit.
Can I get level A shorts?
Can't help you there.
Damn it. All right. Well, maybe someday. I would buy those. I would buy those.
with the chem tape duct to the around your knee. A
chem tape belt. Oh, that'd be so good.
Just fashion a whole suit out of chem tape.
That's right. Just oh my God. If that wouldn't hurt so bad taking it off, we would do that as a joke.
You are a hero of the people. I appreciate you coming on the show and spitting a little fire here. If there's any questions, send it in to us at Bob or Mike at the Hazmat Guys, and we will pass it along to Dan. But Dan, if you're crazy enough to leave your email, don't be surprised when your email list blows up. Do you want to leave your email?
Absolutely. I've got no issue with that. And I'm here to help, right? Like I said, I've spent the vast majority of my career at DuPont in a technical support role, helping people that actually have to wear the garments, making sure, people are wearing the right thing for the hazards they're dealing with. And, I've dealt with hazmat, but I do a staggering amount of this with industrial users as well. So yeah, my email, if you guys are ready, Daniel.G as in George.Bowen, Bowen, at DuPont.com. And I'll give you my cell phone number, 302-559-8931. I'm actually on the, if you call in after hours and you get our 800 number, my phone number is given out there as after hours technical support as well. So I'm more than happy to talk to anybody.
You're the best, man.
That is incredible.
Yeah. Dan, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
No problem, guys. Thanks for having me. I love this stuff. It's and obviously I'm passionate about it. I'm just trying to make sure we don't put people in harm's way.
That is our goal as well. So I'm glad our goals aligned for this one.
All right. Good night.
Thanks, guys.